And welcome to our series about the basics of keeping and maintaining houseplants. In this video, I'll be covering a segment called Basic Houseplant Care Part 2. Part 2 will be going over light and water and some other tips and tricks of keeping your houseplant very happy. So in my previous video about picking your plant, I would go over different lighting from north, south, east, and west windows, but in case you missed it, here's a recap. So north windows never get direct sunlight coming through them, but rather a lot of consistent indirect light. If you have a northeast or northwest window, you'll get some morning and evening direct sunlight during the summer, and north windows also get the coldest since there isn't any direct sun to warm them up. South windows get the most intense direct sunlight in the peak of the afternoon, and south windows also get the warmest. Any plants that demand lots of warm and hot sunlight will do great in a south window, like cacti or succulents. East windows get a lot of direct, gentle morning sunlight since the sun's rays aren't as intense as they would be in the afternoon, and then they also get indirect light throughout the day. And then last but not least, west windows get direct sunlight in the afternoon, and because the afternoon sun's rays are much more intense, it can be a more intense window than an east window. So depending on what your plant needs, place them in the window that works best for them. When you see plants that have little tags on them that say full to partial sun, you can put them in a south or west window. Full to partial sun usually means 3 to 6 hours of direct sunlight. So when you notice a plant tag that says medium light, an east window is an ideal for a medium light plant because it receives gentle direct morning light. And low light to shade, when it says that on a plant, is best for a north window since north windows get lots of soft indirect light. So you can tell your houseplant needs a little bit more sunlight if you notice that the plant is heavily leaning toward the direction of the sun or if it appears to be stretching toward the light. You can easily identify stretching if the stem of the plant looks lakey and thin instead of stable and thick. You'll also notice smaller leaves, a lack of growth, and more dying leaves that either turn brown or yellow if your plant is not getting enough sun. If your plant needs more sun, move them to a space that gets more light. So you also need to be careful when you're moving your plant to a different source of light. If you notice the north-facing window isn't enough sun for your plant, do not move that plant right into a south window. The plant will probably get shocked from the adjustment and potentially burn. It's best to ease your plant into new light. Now, if your plant is getting too much sun and getting burnt, here are some signs to look for. Leaves that look bleached, apparent burns of yellow or brown marks on the leaves, wrinkled leaves that sort of look like a raisin or even crispy leaves. And if your plant is getting burnt, try to move them several feet away from the window so that they aren't getting so much direct light. And if you unfortunately don't have good window lighting, you can always opt for ordering grow lights for your plants. The types of grow lights I have and are most familiar with are LED lights. LED lights are also energy efficient, which is helpful if you have a plant that requires a lot of light. I have lights that have red and blue wavelengths that can stimulate plant growth and can be set on a timer, which is very convenient. Sometimes these lights can be very intense for a plant to be put under, so be sure to slowly acclimate them to the light. So the next important thing about plant care is watering. Usually the easiest and most common rule of thumb for all plants and their watering needs is to stick your finger into the soil and about 2 inches deep. And if past those 2 inches the soil is dry, then your plant needs to be watered. If it's still wet or moist, then your plant likely doesn't need to be watered unless you have a specific plant that likes to have moist soil. You can also check for watering needs by seeing if the leaves look a little droopy or thirsty, and some plant types, like I said, like to have more moist soil. Some like to have their leaves misted if they like more humidity, and you can find out these needs by doing research about the plant you have or the plant that you want. So I tend to err on the side of caution and try not to saturate my plants when it comes time to water them, because if the soil is too moist, you can attract fungus gnats, which are the bane of my existence, or give your plant root rot. I try to put in some water, watch it soak into the soil, and then watch the saucer underneath the plant. If you watered your plant and you notice that the saucer or the drainage plate is full of water, you probably put too much water in, and watering your plant might seem like the easiest catch-all answer, but it's important to read about how much watering your plant prefers and to test the dryness of the soil in between watering. If it's been a week and the soil is still wet when you stick your finger 2 inches into the soil, then your plant probably doesn't need to be watered again. Also keep in mind during winter time, when your house is a little bit cooler or when the plant's near the window is a little bit cooler, your plants actually need to be watered less because the cooler temperatures keeps the water from evaporating so quickly and there's less sunlight. and during the hotter months with more intense sunlight and warmth, they'll need more regular watering. And if you have succulents or cacti, avoid watering them heavily because these are drought-resistant plants whose natural environment is lots of heat and not a lot of water. I learned this recently, but succulent roots are actually close to the top of the soil because it's easier for them to get water that way in their native environments, which makes sense. But that does mean it's much easier to overwater and accidentally kill your succulent. I use a dropper to give my succulents water instead of using a watering pot because it prevents me from accidentally overwatering them. So fertilizer can give your plants extra boosts. The one I have can be mixed with water, and I did notice a difference in my plants a few weeks after using it. They perked up a little bit, they got a little bit more intense in color. You definitely don't want to fertilize your plant too much. Imagine it as a sort of candy treat for your plants, even though it is healthy. Some plants have more nutrition demand, which requires more fertilizer, and others don't. Again, this can be found out by just doing some research about the kind of plant you have. So the best way to give your plants nutritious soil is to just start composting. Composting is quite easy and can provide you with some awesome soil to give your plants, and it's environmentally friendly. If you don't have a yard to start a compost, you can always buy fertilizer to give to your houseplants, and you can always switch out their soil every year like you're supposed to do. I do not, but I highly recommend that you do it. Please leave a comment if you have any questions, and I hope this was helpful. Happy planting!